this notion of, culturally and linguistically responsive RTI or MTSS gives us permission to not the idea of when do we test, but this notion of when do we support, and how do we support, and how do we assess early on. So this notion of really enriching what's called like tier one, so the classroom environment. How do we enrich that environment, make it more culturally linguistically responsive, use ESL, bilingual pedagogy in the classroom, so that most of the needs of most English language learners' needs will be met there. But then there are a small percentage of children who will need other support. So then again, proactively you can have small group instruction that's ELL appropriate in the classroom, but targeting those students who are having a little bit more challenge than other students. You're still not in special education, but you're providing student support. And this process is really fluid because they may have what they need so that they don't even need the small group instruction anymore. They have the resources and the situation was resolved. But then there are other students, and there are a handful of students, maybe 3 to 5% of students, that even with a rich learning environment in their classroom, even with small group instruction, even with sort of one-on-one or very small group instruction and support, those students may still not make the progress that you would expect compared to their like peers. And so it's of those students that you then can go on to further assessment and explore if it is in fact maybe not just English language learning needs, where you want to continue to support them, but additionally they may also have special education needs. But what this allows us to do is we don't, again, wait for them to have to fail or to have such difficulties that it's very difficult. The question is, when do we support? When do we intervene and support? Well, as soon as or before there are difficulties, right? So that's that notion. I'm describing 3 tiers of support, but there are systems in the United States where it's 7 tiers of support, right? And the process is, how to make the whole system more culturally linguistically responsive. And so I worry when it's this notion of waiting. While we don't want to over-identify students immediately that they're having challenges, we go to special education. But I worry about students who have challenges, who have anxiety, who have language expressive difficulties, who have reading difficulties, who have these intrinsic difficulties, and we need to support them early on and in a way that is culturally linguistically appropriate for them as early as possible. But I think if RTI and MTSS is done in a culturally linguistically responsive way, you can support those students early on, and then I think find the kids who are also have special education needs a lot sooner, I think.
Becky Bueno says, would like to learn more about linguistically responsive RTIs, so she is right on the same page. And Katie Myers says, we use an RTI approach before developing an IEP. What strategies would you suggest? So I think both of those comments kind of highlight, this in the maybe in the ideal scenario, what does that look like, the culturally and linguistically responsive RTI?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, that's sort of what we describe in the book, but my colleague Lori Donnell and I were able to do a guide, culturally and linguistically appropriate RTI squared. We did a project for the WIDA consortium, and you can just go on the WIDA.US website. It's a free downloadable kind of guide, and it has a place for information gathering. It also has questions to ask along different factors. So that's available free of charge. You can use that with your teams, and it's kind of a guide so that we have questions that we can ask during problem solving when we're having, the children are having challenges, but also a culturally linguistically responsive learning environment. It's huge. It's honoring students' languages in multi-languages. It's affirming their identity as bilingual, multilingual, multicultural beings. It's using pedagogy that makes content comprehensible and meaningful while also teaching language, academic language, in a consistent, sort of articulated way throughout their schooling. It's bringing in their cultural and linguistic resources from home so that the students see themselves reflected in the curriculum, and they also learn about how other people live. It's building on their strengths. I think that's a really very big piece, and I really, my colleague Teresa and I are very inspired by the work that's being done at the University of Pennsylvania and other places on positive psychology and the focus on strengths and building students' strengths, all of our strengths, identifying them and using them. It's a really different approach because oftentimes we focus on student deficit, but really helping students find what their strengths are, as well as the family, and then when in instruction and intervention and assessment, and then when things are maybe becoming challenging, use those strengths to help them work on those things that are difficult for them. It's a culturally linguistically responsive learning environment has meaningful curriculum and instruction that's connected, and they don't learn things sort of in a reductionist way, but in a meaningful context. So all of these things that are really important and essential for English language learners, I think, make an entire system more culturally and linguistically responsive for all our students. Nancy Cummins from Colorado, University of Colorado in Boulder, I believe. Sorry, Nancy. So Nancy Cummins, her work with her colleagues on sort of designing schools with diversity in mind to begin with is just brilliant work. It really is. It's starting from the beginning to create these learning environments that are responsive to the diversity in the community that you serve, but it ends up being a rich environment for all the students. So Nancy may be in Finland right now, but because she does work there quite a bit, and but very inspiring her work with her colleagues on just that. So there are a few resources there that might help our participants today.
That's great, and when we go through our archive of this, we will make sure to put links to all of these different resources as well, and I think that's, again, another example of what's good for ELLs is good for everybody, even at a system-wide, school-wide level.